Right, I am going to kick off, I think, because people will dribble in, and if anything, they'll just miss me waffling on before the interesting stuff starts. So welcome to everyone. Quite a lot of people here, which is pretty good. 20 odd, 50 odd sign-ups, so still time for others to join. I'm Gavin Wood. I'm part of the City Connect team at the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, which is the Combined Authority's active travel team. I lead on various things at the CA. I lead on our engagement work with businesses. I lead on our work with bike and scooter parking in schools, and I'm also leading on the community active travel hubs work. I've been at the CA for about 7 years, and I used to work for Cycling UK for CTC for a lot of years. You're going to hear a bit from me about the vision for this piece of work, what we're hoping to create using the funding. A little later on, you're going to hear some probably pretty dry stuff about details on the process, but probably more importantly, more interestingly, you're going to hear from some guest speakers who you can see, who've really kindly offered their time, and I'm massively appreciative of that. But they're people who've been involved in setting up active travel hubs or who are actually running hubs. They're going to give us some insight and expertise, and I hope that's going to inspire you, help you visualize just what a hub could be. And hopefully it'll motivate you to apply for my funding too, even, which will be good. A quick bit of housekeeping. I think participants have no choice, but in case you do, if you could remain muted with your video off, and if you could use the chat function rather than the Q&A function to ask any questions. My colleague, who's also here, Emma, she's going to monitor that. And we'll try and respond as we go, and I'll ask participants to kind of keep an eye on the chat as well, and if they've got a response, then to provide one. If we don't get a chance to answer, what I will do is I will compile a list of questions, and we will send a written response to everyone who was registered. Hopefully, there will be an opportunity at the end, if we have time, for a Q&A where we do have the power to unmute you, and then you'll be able to actually ask us a question, which would be good. Lastly, we are recording the session, and I will post that on our website, and just so people who didn't manage to make it, or other people who wanted to come but couldn't, are able to watch back the session. So, all right, a little bit of background info here. The funding is £500,000 of DFT funding, Department for Transport. And it's come from their active travel fund and capability fund. It's money that was specifically assigned to the development of community active travel hubs. And I'm sure you all know what active travel means, but in case you don't, so by that we mean trips made by physically active means. That's walking, that's riding a bike, push scooting, wheeling, using a wheelchair, things of that nature. Funding is capped at 50 grand per application, which sounds like a lot of money. But that could soon disappear. We see it as seed funding for 1 year, and to manage people's expectation if they are going to apply for the funding, given its limitations, we're probably not going to be funding new buildings or very large scale building renovations and things like that. I think the money just wouldn't stretch to it. Really hoping it's going to be a competitive application process. So in other words, I hope we get in more applications than we're able to fund, and that we're then able to cherry pick the best ones that are going to meet the aims and objectives that we've set out in the guidance. Application window is open, and it's going to run for about 2 months. We'll close Friday the 15th of July, so quite a lot of time to get applications in. A little bit about the vision for community active travel hubs. Not going to read that out, but that is our pretty broad definition. I think it sums up what a community active travel hub should be. And it's worth noting, although we are calling them active travel hubs, they're not going to be limited to that. So they're not going to be limited to providing services that are going to just encourage people to travel actively. We recognise that people doing things recreationally a lot of the time is their start point. And then they may progress to making what we call utility journeys, but they may not, and that's fine too. But the more people that we can expose to cycling, to walking and things like that, the more likely it is that some of those are going to progress and be converted to doing active travel. which is the longer term goal really. And there's ambitious targets in West Yorkshire around that. And you can read about those in the transport strategy if you're struggling to sleep. Why do we want to develop them? Really, we want West Yorkshire to be a place where more people can choose to walk, to cycle, to scoot and wheel shorter journeys to work, to education, so to school, to colleges, things like that, or to the shops. Maybe even part of longer journeys by public transport. And a way to helping us achieve that is to have places such as hubs that become focal points for softer side of getting people making active trips. Like a lot of you, probably, I think, I believe the way to getting this outcome is probably through infrastructure, so engineering places that enable people to do this. But that's a bit of a longer term strategy, it costs a lot of money. And whilst that investment and redesign happens, the engagement side, the softer side of things can help accelerate uptake in infrastructure, helping people overcome their personal barriers, whatever they might be. So we see these hubs as being a place or places where we can supercharge the engagement work that we already deliver. That'll hopefully open up some of those opportunities for people to get a bike, join a walking group, learn how to fix a puncture, maybe just meet other people and build their confidence in a safe and welcoming environment. They're going to allow us to deliver more adult cycle training places. They're going to allow us to deliver more cycle for health sessions, more accessible and inclusive cycle sessions, more led walks, community street audits, all the other good stuff that our partners deliver. So that's the vision. That's what we're kind of hoping to achieve. There's already some of these places up and running, and I'm gonna pass on to our guest speakers now, who, like I said, have very kindly given up their time. First speaker is going to be Graham McQueen. I'll let Graham introduce himself. Graham, I've got your slides. If you just want to give me a nudge when you want me to move on, and I'll do that.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. My name's Graham McQueen. I'm the Senior Manager on the Smarter Choices, Smarter Places programme with Pass for All. Here to talk about active travel hubs, because I was involved in the initial setting up of a few active travel hubs in Scotland. But I'll only be briefly talking about that, and I'll talk more about my current role, which is funding projects like active travel hubs and what we look for and what we think you should consider when you're setting up a new project. I couldn't possibly comment too much on active travel hubs because Shirley would correct me with it probably. So, so next slide, please, Gavin. So the two hubs that I was involved in at the start were the Active Travel Hub in Stirling and the Active Travel Hub in Falkirk, both ran by FEL. The Active Travel Hub in Stirling was the first of its kind in Scotland. It is at the train station in Stirling, and really the big focus was on linking active journeys to sustainable journeys, trying to link that up, trying to encourage people to walk, cycle at the train station before getting the train, and basically getting people out of cars. The Active Travel Hub in Falkirk we were able to set up a couple of years after. It was a similar sort of idea, a physical space in Falkirk town centre. And again, there was a lot of really good partnership work and encouraging other organisations, again, that Shirley will go on to speak about, but also looking at encouraging more sustainable and active travel in and out of the town centre. So next slide, Gavin, thank you. So some quick facts about the Falkirk one. Opened in February 2018. As I say, the aim was to encourage and support people to make active travel their first choice. Initially, it was funded by the Low Carbon Travel and Transport Challenge Fund, which was European funding for the first 3 years. But one of the big things that I'll kind of talk about funding as well is that it's the ability to source a wide range of funding, which allowed different specific projects to run from the building, all supporting each other. It was a really good way to do it. And I think that's probably relevant to you guys if you're looking at hubs, because it sounds like the one grant won't be enough to kind of keep the hub going for more than a year. So you'll be looking at other grant funding and trying to match these things up, I think. Next slide, Gavin, please. So yeah, the hubs, this is just probably preaching and converted. It was revenue funding. That's again what we'll talk about with our current role. But so revenue means that it's not about building paths, it's about being focused on that behaviour change. It's things like led rides, events, promotion. Bike share's a big thing for the hubs, or was a big thing for the hubs in Stirling and Falkirk. Supporting other organisations with promotion to their staff, partnerships, developing partnerships with things like the NHS. and developing the Scottish Active Travel Hub network, which was and still continues to be quite an important source of information for new projects and existing projects, and that kind of peer-to-peer learning, knowledge sharing, something that FEL are heavily involved in still as well. And the next one, please. But now I no longer work for FEL, I work for Pass for All. We are Scotland's national walking charity. Next slide, Gavin, thanks. Oh, yep, so as I say, we are Scotland's national walking charity, and so walking is our front and centre. That's what we're trying to achieve. We believe that walking is for everyone, it's for everywhere, and it's for every day. So we believe that everyone in Scotland, no matter who they are or where they live, should benefit from walking. We believe that our places and spaces should be safe and attractive for everyone to walk in. And we believe that everyone in Scotland should feel motivated to walk every day. I'm going to go on about walking quite a lot because I think when you're setting up an active travel hub, you know, you need to consider the hierarchy of travel, and walking is the easiest one for the vast majority of people. So it's the easiest way to get that behaviour change. So that's what we're looking for at Pass for All. I think the next slide, sorry, Gavin, next slide. The specific bit that I manage with Pass for All is the Smarter Choices, Smarter Places programme. So again, sorry, Gavin, next slide, I'm rattling through these. So the Smarter Choices, Smarter Places programme is Pass for All's behaviour change programme. It's funded by Transport Scotland to support behaviour change towards more sustainable forms of transport. So we've got, you know, all our grants are based on local needs. We support local projects, charities, community groups, social enterprises, all looking at what they can do within their communities to support the community to travel more sustainably. So we split that grant funding up into 3 different funds. So at the moment, this financial year, we've got 12 million worth of funding. We've got a 5 million local authority fund, and in Scotland we support all 32 local authorities, and that money's split up on a per head of capita basis. We have a 2 million capability fund, which is for kind of more established organisations with experience of delivering behaviour change, and we fund them for their ongoing work, but also to link in with the open fund and to support newer organisations and new projects with their knowledge and experience. And then we've got the 5 million open fund, which I think can be quite similar to the fund you guys are looking at, in that we've got grants of between 5 and 50,000 for projects. You know, it's basically for projects that encourage people out of cars. And yeah, we fund across Scotland, we fund maybe approximately 15 projects which are or could be classed as kind of active travel hubs. So next slide, Gavin, thanks. So I think this is very important to consider when you're setting up a new active travel hub or a new behaviour change projects, and we work to this basis on all of our grants. So you can't expect someone who's never cycled to suddenly jump on the bike and start cycling to work. You need to kind of think about how you're going to influence their behaviour change, how you're going to support them to make that behaviour change, and then finally how you're going to make them maintain that behaviour change. So we work on the assumption that this is the correct way to do it. So we've got the pre-contemplation stage where people aren't aware that there's a problem. Then you've got contemplation, oh, I need to start cycling, I need to start walking to work. You've got that stage, and then you've got preparation, they're getting ready to do it, and then you've got the action that we all want, the actual behaviour change happening, but then you also need to maintain that afterwards. So I think when you're looking at new projects, looking at new ways to reach people, you need to consider this as you're going. Next slide, Gavin, please. And we base our outcomes on that theory of behaviour change. So every project applying to us, we ask them to work towards one of these outcomes. And the purpose of that is to make them think about what they're doing, think about how they're going to influence behaviour change and how they're going to help people maintain that change. So the outcomes we work towards are more people choose not to drive, which was a kind of answer to COVID and have people working at home. We want to sustain people working from home, you know, support their mental health, support them to be able to do that long term, because obviously if they're working from home, they're travelling less. We want more people to choose walking, cycling or wheeling for everyday journeys, more people to choose sustainable transport for longer journeys, people developing more positive attitudes towards sustainable transport, people's knowledge about sustainable transport increasing, and there's an increased evidence base to support sustainable travel interventions. So we'll support any project that's working towards one of these outcomes. And I think, Gavin, you were saying as well about you can't, you know, it's not, people will get into cycling or walking perhaps for leisure purposes, and it may or may not lead to them doing it for day-to-day journeys. The day-to-day journeys is the ultimate, but you need to encourage people to get into it first of all, and that's about changing their attitudes and changing people's, you can't expect them to change their behaviour without that. Okay, next slide, Gavin, thank you. Again, massively important thing to consider when you're setting up your new projects. And again, this feeds into like what you're saying about actual capital changes as well, Gavin. I think the transport hierarchy, which I'm sure you're all aware of, is something that we ask all our projects to consider. Walking, wheeling at the top of the transport hierarchy should be everyone's priority. You know, in any projects you're running, any behaviour change you want to do, it should be about getting people walking and wheeling first, then cycling, then public transport, then shared transport, and then very last you want everyone out of their private cars, basically. So again, this is something we ask all our projects to consider. And I think if you're setting up a new active travel hub and looking at what you can actually do, then this should, and in my opinion, this should be your priorities. This should be how you form your priorities. Next one, Gavin, thanks. Another thing to mention, you know, just this is something that works for all of our active travel hubs and all the active travel hubs we support. You know, the work you're going to be doing cuts across so many different policy contexts that it's a real benefit to the projects you're setting up. As I've already mentioned about the funding, the way we've worked hubs in the past has always had to have a kind of mishmatch and a marrying up of different funding to make it sustainable and make it work. But you've got a real benefit here in that everything you do to increase walking or increase cycling cuts across so many policies. So you've got health benefits, environmental benefits, transport benefits. You know, you've got benefits to people's health, mental health, social health, economy, community, environment. So it's, you know, it's a myriad of benefits for everyone in society. So look at making partnerships with organisations to focus on these things. You know, Shirley again will talk about some of the brilliant partnerships with the NHS and Falkirk, and that really adds strength to your applications and adds strength to what you're doing, and can adds other strings to your bow and can bring in other funding as well. So look at working with partners like the NHS or environmental organisations or other transport groups. I think the more partnership working that you can bring into your project, and the better chance of it being sustainable and the better chance of influencing more behaviour change. And it's a really good position to be in that you can cut across so many policy contexts. Next slide, Gavin, thanks. Sorry, I'm just kind of rattling through this, but I'm going to end with a kind of big plead about walking again. So, you know, walking is what Pass for All do. We encourage people to walk both for activities and for daily journeys. You know, these are all the benefits of it. It can reduce, you know, health risks around heart disease, strokes. It tackles climate change. It's free. This is a big thing. It's free. There's no equipment, so it's easier for most people to do. You know, I won't run through all these benefits. We're all aware of them, but I think when you're considering what your project's going to do, how it's going to work, consider walking first, then other forms of active travel, then other forms of sustainable travel. Next slide, Gavin, please. And just, excuse me, just running through, I mean, we're all aware of these, but just the benefits of walking, you know, increase productivity, boost your mood, reduce congestion. Sorry, next slide, Gavin. I've got more benefits here. I could go on for ages. Benefits. Improve your strength, improve your balance, sleep better. Next slide, Gavin, please. You know, these are things to consider as well. I mean, I think, Gavin, you mentioned your street audits is something that the hubs could be doing. You know, this is an example that we've got back. So 63% of people in Scotland have been forced to change their walking routes due to cars parked on pavements, poor maintenance of pavements, you know, other users of pavements. So street audits are a really good way to start this, and this is the kind of thing that we look for our active travel hubs to do in their communities. Next slide, Gavin, please. Again, this is around, you know, people feeling safe to walk and cycle. You know, there's big feedback we get that certain paths and certain routes are dark at night and people don't feel safe. So again, this is something we can fund, auditing this, or, you know, active travel hubs looking at how these can be improved and looking at bringing in other funding to improve routes is something that a lot of the active travel hubs we support do. Next one, Gavin, please. I'll just skip that one. I think that's kind of just another start about how important walking is for people. So, and that is me really. So it's just this, as I say, Shirley will be able to fill you in more about the active travel hubs, but I think for us supporting hubs, we look for them to use that active travel hierarchy and to decide what they're doing and what their priorities are. And we also think that it's very important to have that. I mean, for our funding, we actually include a match funding requirement, which helps the projects bring in partnerships and buy-in from other organisations, which in the long term leads to more buy-in, more behaviour change, but also more opportunities to become sustainable and source other funding. So that's me. I mean, I think, you know, I've kind of rattled through that, but, you know, and unfortunately we can't fund projects where you are, but we can link in potential projects to our networks. We can, you know, you can link into we run a series of learning events throughout the year, which are about peer-to-peer learning between all the projects that we support. So, you know, any of you would be more than welcome to come along to them. they're set up on a kind of thematic basis. So please get in touch if you have any questions or if there's anything you think we can help with, because we'd be more than happy to support.
Thanks, Graham. Graham, are those sessions run virtually or are they run face-to-face?
Yes, they're run virtually. We used to run them face-to-face, but then obviously during COVID, we found that, you know, we fund projects in the Western Isles and Orkney and stuff. So, you know, we were able to reach a lot more people. So we're continuing to run them face-to-face. We do have a big annual learning event once a year, which we're continuing to run them online. We do have a big annual learning event as well that we run in Edinburgh at the end of the year. Which again, people would be welcome to come along to, but that's face-to-face, that one.
Thanks, Graham. So two things. You'll have a lot of people now enviously looking at the amount of funding you've got, I think, because we don't have that level of revenue funding in England, sadly. And then your requirement for match funding, we're not requiring match funding of our applicants, but there is a question, and I'll cover this after you guys have spoken, around financial sustainability. So I mean,
that's always been the big question for the hubs. I think is very difficult, and again, I'm sure Shirley will agree, it's very difficult to make them financially sustainable unless you're running some sort of business offering alongside it. So what we've been able to do, and I know the funding, I don't know the funding situation in England as well as I do in Scotland. It's about those partnerships, and it's about working with other organisations and bringing in other strings to your bow that you can bring in marry up different funding together so that you're able to run it.
Yeah. So at which point I'll stress to people listening around consortium bids, and that we'd really welcome bids from multiple from a lead organisation, but in partnership with, maybe with an NHS trust or maybe with a local authority. So thanks, Graham. That was amazing. Thanks, mate. So now I'm going to move on to Shirley. Shirley.
Thanks, Gavin, and thank you for having me. Some of what I will cover, Graham's touched on, so hopefully it's just a re-emphasis, and hopefully I will spark some ideas to support your applications, as Gavin has alluded to as well. So I'm Shirley Patterson. I'm the Active Travel Development Manager for Forth Environment Link. So I oversee our active travel hubs, which I'll talk about in a minute, and really just try to change people's behaviour on cycling, walking and wheeling for everybody. Thank you, Gavin. So over the course of the talk, I'll talk about who we are as a charity, our active travel hubs, access to bikes. I am going to focus more on bikes and walking, just to the nature of the talk. Our funding, which has just been mentioned a little bit, some of our demonstration projects, again, really just to spark some ideas and the lessons that we've learned over the course of having those hubs, both pre and post-COVID. Thanks, Gavin. So Forth Environment Link is a Scottish environmental charity based in Forth Valley, which is pretty much central Scotland. Everything we do is about environmental gain and supporting and encouraging all walks of life, businesses, communities, schools, individuals, to think about how they go about their daily life and how that addresses climate action. So to live more sustainably in harmony with the environment, basically. My job specifically is about sustainable travel and trying to encourage people and support people to change their vehicle, particularly for short everyday journeys, by increasing the amount of walking and cycling that they do. Forth Environment Link is privileged to be one of 7 active travel delivery partners that work alongside Transport Scotland to deliver national programmes, national agendas at a local and regional level. And we're funded specifically to be an exemplar active travel hub, which I'll come on to in a second. Thank you. So here we are in the heart of Scotland. If you click again, Gavin, and again, the problems of not having the control of the mouse, and again, that's okay, no, it's okay. So here we are at the heart of, if you click it again, yeah, at the heart of Scotland, central Scotland. So it covers 3 regions, Stirling, Falkirk and Clackmannanshire. In 2000, that's okay, go back, that's it. So in 2014, we were funded by Transport Scotland to open the first ever, what was known as cycling hub at that point. This was the first in the, certainly Scotland, maybe the UK, active travel hub as we know it. And it was designed to be, as I said, an exemplar hub to promote cycling and walking for everyday journeys, but the focus was definitely on cycling. And that hub was at Stirling train station. And again, quite strategically placed there as a showcase of intermode transport. So come off the train, jump on a bike, carry on your journey. In 2017, we opened our second active travel hub, and this time it was in Falkirk High Street. So again, just trying different models, one at a transport interchange, one on the High Street that had quite a lot of sort of flow of traffic in front of it. In 2017-18, Graham, you might correct me, it was rebranded as the Active Travel Hub, right? So getting away from the cycling element. So the logo at the top there is quite a bespoke logo and is shared amongst other active travel hubs now in Scotland to try and have that branding image with kind of the chain spoke wheel. And the reason for that change was to become more inclusive. So it wasn't just about cycling, it was to include cycling, walking and wheeling, but also to align with sort of national government agendas about sustainable travel. And as I said before, all of the work that we do is about behaviour change and being an example. Because we are regional based, we can try different things which can then be scaled up at a national level. Thank you, Gavin. From the success of the hubs at Falkirk and Stirling, is that moving on?
Possibly. There we go.
From the success of those two hubs, we were then approached by a secondary school in Clackmannanshire who wanted a bit of the action. And we launched in 2019 the first ever schools active travel hub. So this is an embedded officer in the school full time. And the benefit of that is you then have somebody who can build relationships, have that continuity with staff and pupils and build a bit of trust. So it's not somebody that just kind of flies in for a day, does a bit of delivery and flies out again. They're there and they're seen as really seen as part of a member of staff, and therefore we can deliver a lot more of activities. Following the success of that first hub, which saw a 700% increase in cycling in that first year alone, we now have two other secondary school active travel hubs being launched this month, one in Stirling and another one in Clackmannanshire. So these are all manned by one member of staff. And through the work in those hubs, as I've said, we can start to deliver much more in-depth bespoke activities. So we've developed an SVQ in bike maintenance for pupils that perhaps are not as academically minded. We basically try and address all the barriers to cycling, particularly amongst girls in secondary school. So we have lots of competitions and challenges, breaking down that biking is not cool image by having smoothie bikes, mountain bike activities, pump tracks, sort of events, come and try different things, different activities throughout the year. We work with the primary schools that will transition into those secondary schools, and again just trying to keep that continuity, because primary kids are brilliant at cycling and walking, but they get into high school, particularly girls, and that cycling rate drops off a cliff somewhere. So by showing them the safe route to the school, not being driven, and giving them that confidence in how to repair a puncture, hopefully we're setting those seeds that actually you can continue to cycle even when you're in secondary school, even though that's a little bit further from your home. Cycling training, lead rides. So these schools all now have their own bike fleets, so we can go out at any time that we want and when a school or the teachers ask for it. And increasingly in those school embedded hubs, we're being asked to work with mental health groups. So that a lot of these schools have now got wellbeing support groups, particularly post-COVID, and we're working with those groups too. And it might be walks to a pond and have some food, or it might be a lead ride somewhere. Thanks, Gavin. The other bespoke satellite hub we have, as Graham mentioned, is with the NHS Forth Valley. So we have got a principal hospital at Forth Valley Royal Hospital with satellite satellite NHS locations throughout Forth Valley. And we have a member of staff that works very closely with NHS on an embedded officer principle. And we have lots of pop-up hubs that appear every now and then at forecourts and in foyers. This is part of an employer engagement programme, but NHS Forth Valley is one of the biggest employers in our region, which is why we invest quite a lot of time with them. They approached us in 2017, originally to help them address car parking congestion. But from that, the work has snowballed, and particularly post-COVID. So we were already working with them on sort of lead rides, e-bike demonstrations, pop-up hubs, signposting. But in April 2020, the electric bikes that we have, which I'll talk about in a second, were all recalled and given out specifically for key workers to ensure that they continue to be able to get to work when public transport no longer was operating, but also for their mental health and well-being. And the response that we had to that e-bike library was phenomenal. We couldn't keep up with demand. They were given the bikes for as long as they needed them. We're only just recalling them now. And from that, we've now been able to start an ambassador programme. So having champions within the hospital that can talk to other staff on our behalf. We're also now working with GP surgeries, giving them e-bikes and e-cargo bikes for nurses and midwives to do their house visits, and that's a trial project. Working with patient health departments, and again I'll talk about that later, because that's one of our demonstration projects. And as part of all of that work with NHS, also providing free bike services to make sure that the bikes that they have from us on loan are still roadworthy. So it's a 12-week-ish programme where the bikes are all recalled and given a once-over to make sure that they're still okay. We have in the past just done pop-up Wheelie Wednesdays. So again, just trying to think of unusual names. So Wheelie Wednesdays, again, a regular occurrence every week, pop-up hub, as you see in the picture, just to get a bit of attention and through flow. But we're also, so the patient health projects as well, variety of departments, mental health, weight loss departments, and oncology. Thanks, Gavin. I've put this next slide in, and it's actually quite interesting that Graham and Gavin talked about this before my talk, about partnerships and the importance of partnerships. So since 2017, for every £1 that NHS Forth Valley funded FEL to support their work on behaviour change around active travel, we levered an additional £8.50 in other funding. So over the course of 2017 to 2020, I think we did this work, we had managed to amass £843,000 of funding towards active travel. And it's really just to emphasise the importance of partnership and how each partner can access different pots of money, which then exemplifies the work that you're trying to do. Thanks, Gavin. So I mentioned that one of the big aspects of our work is access to bikes, particularly those on low income or hard to reach audiences. So these are, again, I'm just throwing this in as examples of some of the partners you might want to work with that's going to help your application sing out a little bit more. So we are very privileged at the moment to be working on 2 pilots on behalf of Scottish Government. Scottish Government has an ambition in the lifetime of their Holyrood parliamentary seating to provide a free bike to every child on low income. So at the moment they're piloting different models of how to approach that. So we're working with both a local authority and Barnardo's to trial 2 very different models of giving access to bikes with children who are either very vulnerable and deprived or on low income. We're working in regions of multiple deprivation with Clickmanager Council. We're increasingly being asked to support refugees. I don't know if you know much about the refugee and asylum seeking status in Britain, but some of these asylum seekers and refugees can be posted into a hotel for months with as little as £8 a week pocket money, not allowed to cook, not allowed to go anywhere. The funding, the £8 a week doesn't allow them even a train journey to go and visit somewhere. So their mental health is in a pretty poor state of affairs. So again, it's supporting them with access to bikes, it's supporting them on road safety lessons, so which side of the road to cycle on, simple things like that. Volunteers and unemployed groups, again, unemployed people do not have access to cycle to work schemes in the same way that employed people do. So how do they have ways of accessing tax-free or cheaper bikes? So again, providing projects to around that group of people and volunteers in the same way. Students, FEL facility has helped to facilitate the introduction of 2 public bike share schemes in Forth Valley. So as part of that, our ongoing work is to support membership registration to those schemes, which offers low affordable access to bikes in a public setting, but also securing funding to allow to basically pay for monthly and annual membership to some of these audiences that are on this list. And as I've mentioned before, increasingly working with mental health groups, both within an NHS setting, but out with that as well. Thank you. As part of all the work that we offer, the basic bread and butter is this list of things in front of you. So it's all about breaking down the barriers. Why don't people cycle and walk? Cycling particularly. Confidence, road safety. It's not cool. They're worried about their hair. They're worried about showers at the end of the day and when they get to work. So it's helping break all that down. So we provide cycling confidence lessons, safe route planning. So don't think like a driver, think like a cyclist. Where are the footpaths that you can cycle? Where are the quiet roads? And making routes bespoke to people. So where's their start point? Where is their end point? Access to bikes I've talked about. Led rides, group rides, both as a confidence thing, but also to build communities and share experiences. Electric bike demonstrations and loans. We have a fleet of electric bikes as part of a trial centre for Energy Savings Trust that allows public free access to bikes, and I'll come on to that in the next slide. Dr. Bike pop-up service hubs. So these are mechanics which appear in popular places. It could be popular paths on the way to school. It could be in car parks, in sort of a workplace setting. Bring your bike along and we'll repair it on the spot and on you go. More formal maintenance class sessions, but also spreading the word of what we do and what we're trying to achieve with presences at festivals, events, galas, and so on. Thanks, Gavin. So I mentioned the electric bikes. So as part of our Energy Savings Trust trial centre, we have a fleet of electric bikes, and we also have push cargo bikes and electric cargo bikes. And this is supporting families and businesses to think about that sustainable travel. So the electric bikes pre-COVID allow people to hire a bike from 3 days to 60 days. But the lesson from COVID was actually giving them longer, allowed them more opportunity to try the bike that they had been given. If you give people a bike for too short a time, they feel too pressurised to fit it into their weekly routine. They end up giving it back, having not tried it. So give them it for a big long period of time, and they'll find the window to try that e-bike. And the importance of those trial centres is e-bikes are quite expensive, although they are becoming more affordable. So people don't want to go and invest that money and get the wrong bike. So we have different models, different styles, different sizes. Find the one that's right for you, and then we'll help you find funding to go and buy that bike. And that's all free as part of our funding from Scottish Government. We're increasingly increasing our e-cargo bike library. Some of these e-cargo bikes are for luggage or shopping or moving. We've got some businesses that will use e-cargo bikes to move their products around to shops, but also increasingly showing and demonstrating e-cargo bikes for transporting children as well. And again, different models to suit different styles and preferences. Just getting the visual out there so that people see what's available and what's possible. Thanks, Gavin. So just quickly through the mechanics, we have our own in-house mechanics who do regular servicing on all the bikes that we help through our partners. So the bikes that we've helped to purchase for NHS and the schools, they're regularly checked over to make sure they're roadworthy as part of that partnership agreement. Our Dr. Bike pop-ups and our more formal sort of maintenance sessions. So again, building that confidence on how to repair a puncture, to change a brake pad, change your gears, to break down that barrier of people being worried of being stranded on the roadside. And during lockdown, a lot of that was recorded virtually and put onto online tutorials on YouTube so that it's more accessible to people. Thanks. So this is a bit of a summary of our funding at the moment. It changes year on year. We've got a few small pots of mental health funding this year, but that's basically the core of it at the moment. A lot of it driven from Transport Scotland, but coming from various different partners. And as Graham alluded to earlier on, a report that we did in 2019 into the sustainability of active travel hubs showed that despite that added value, that leverage of for every £1, I think it was for every £1, it was £8 in value as a social economic value, they're not sustainable because they're relying on so much funding. And I would reiterate that as new hubs starting out, have a think about that sustainability and where you're getting your funding from. Can it be a commercial arm? People do not value active travel in the same way that they value vehicles. So they won't pay, they'll pay for a car, but they don't want to pay for bike services. So that's something for you to think about. I don't have the answer, as Graham knows. It's not an easy one to crack. But if you're offering free services, free bike rides, free classes, then just think about the image that portrays, that it's a free service, and you're setting that precedent right from the start. Thanks, Gavin. So I'm just going to skim through a couple of our demonstration projects. So a year ago, we started working with NHS on providing electric bikes to oncology or bowel cancer patients. These were referred to us by NHS. They were given a bike pre-surgery and then again after surgery. And this, it's been proven that the fitter you are going into surgery, the quicker your recovery. And that was the principle behind this project, to demonstrate that actually if you even just having a bike for a few weeks before surgery can make a massive difference to your post-surgery recovery. So we're very lucky to have that pilot. The patients were all given wraparound care packages. Bespoke, so I'm getting buzzed by different people here, bespoke care packages, one-to-one support on where to find bikes, to site where they can get funding for bikes, and again that route planning from their home to journeys from that home and distances that they could manage, bearing in mind that they are medically ill at that time. Thanks, Gavin. E-cargo bikes, I've mentioned it. So again, just an example of one of the pilots that we're working on is with Stirling University as part of their green recovery, to demonstrate the reduction in vehicle use by using e-cargo bikes. And there's various departments in the university interested in using as postal services, grounds maintenance, property maintenance. So supporting them through training, providing the right, so trying different models of cargo bikes to get the right model for them for what they need to be cargoing, that's the word, and then supporting them through that journey. And the next slide, Gavin. Okay, lessons learned. This is quite a long email. The next two slides have got quite a lot in them, but Gavin will send them the slides out afterwards. So the big things for us is to have a champion in the work, wherever you're working, whatever your audience is. And one of the key things is to identify who you want to work with. Sorry, Gavin, back. If you can find champions in that audience to talk on your behalf when you're not there, perfect. So in our NHS setting, we've now got these ambassadors. We've got 3 ambassadors now working in NHS Forth Valley, talking about their experience of using e-bikes for commuting during the pandemic. And they are singing, they've got NHS clothes on, and so they have the ear of their colleagues more than we have. Think about your location. So I've mentioned already about our 2 public-facing active travel hubs. They are great to get the message out there. They're great for the branding, but they will only attract people who are really already interested in cycling and walking. People who have already got that in their head and want to come and talk to you about cycling. They're less likely to attract people who are disengaged already, who have a fear of, if I go in there, I'm going to have to start talking about cycling and I don't really know anything about cycling. There's a sort of almost an intimidation factor, no matter how friendly you make that space look. People on low income or sort of ethnic minority groups, again, do not find that a place, an approachable place for them to step over that threshold. So you need to go to them. One of the big lessons for us is don't expect people to come to you. Make it as easy as possible for those people to engage with you. Go into a community centre, go into a school playground, go into a car park, find your audience. Don't ask them to come to you. And that's specifically for those harder to reach audiences. Parents, they don't have time to come and search for you. Think about incentive-based challenges. We use a lot of our challenges. So Pass for All have a step count challenge. We use that in all our pilots. Sustrans do workplace challenges. Bring all that in, sell all those challenges. People like a bit of competition, and make sure your prizes are good. Make sure there's lots of categories for prizes, so there's lots of opportunities for people to win something. But people really respond to that competition, that peer competition and teamwork. Having an electric bike fleet is really important if you can get the capital to pay for that. It's a really good crowd puller. People want to try e-bikes that haven't got the courage or confidence to go to a shop and try one because they are so expensive. So they'll come and just play around with them and ask you lots of questions. It's a nice little sort of, as I say, gets people in to talk to you if you're a pop-up gazebo event, hub event. We have in the past done community active travel action plans, which is the picture that you see on here. And the purpose of those action plans is to talk to the community about the barriers of cycling and walking in their local environment. They're fantastic to identify those barriers, but manage your expectations and manage their expectations very closely. The idea that those action plans would then develop into a working group that would be your champions in the community are very difficult, not helped by COVID, having broken down all communications at all. They're really difficult because nobody has the time or the confidence to put their hand up and say, I will lead this. They're all waiting on somebody else. Many people in that community are transient. They have to move around for work. So you've lost that person that was your go-to in that community. But also the very nature of those plans is to identify the problems. So the broken pavements, the unsafe curbs, the broken lights. And there's then an issue of managing expectations of what the council or your local authority are actually able to achieve. So again, lessons learned, just be careful when you're working in a community setting. And the same with employers and workplaces and businesses. Quite often they're ready to engage and they want to invite more of their staff to cycle and walk to work and within work because they know how important that is for staff retention, for mental health, for loss of sick days. But there's never anybody in a workplace who has a dedicated job to push that agenda forward. It's always a tag on or an extra job in somebody's job description to talk about that in the workplace. And there's never a budget for active travel either. So it's quite hard to keep that momentum going unless you're on it all the time on their behalf. Thanks, Gavin. And the last slide that I've got is just to talk about post-COVID. So I've mentioned already about making it personal. Before COVID, we would deliver our electric bikes to people, or we would expect them to come and collect the electric bike from the hub. Somebody would book it in and we'd say, right, come and collect it at this time. We couldn't do that at COVID because the hubs were all closed. And one of the things that we learned was actually make it as easy and as convenient as possible. So we now deliver our e-bikes to the person either at their workplace or at their home of their choice. And they don't have to try and find time to fit in to come and get the bike. We don't have to worry about whether their boot space is big enough because we've got the van. So make it as easy as possible, meet them where they're at, make it personal, one-to-one WhatsApp chats. You know, if it's as simple as that, make it personal so that you're at the end of the phone for them. During lockdown, because of the volume of our key workers that had electric bikes, we started a bike medic out of hours roadside rescue call out service. So this was, as we went into autumn, winter, let's keep these people cycling, give them the confidence in the winter that if their lights failed or they got a puncture at the roadside, they weren't stranded when it was wet and cold. And we had this bike medic call out service. The majority of the NHS key workers told us that that gave them the confidence to continue to cycle during autumn and winter, which was fabulous. It's exactly what we wanted. The problem was, though, that none of the bikes needed repaired. I think out of a year, we had 12 call-outs. So it wasn't financially sustainable for us to have a member of staff specifically dedicated for those 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours at night out of hours. So we worked in partnership with NHS, and we now have an agreement with them that in out of hours, they have a dedicated taxi service, which we identified as being big enough to take an e-bike. The taxi's called, the person's taken to their point of destination, and then that bike is collected in working hours and given priority workshop time. So again, it's just tweaking ideas to make it work for everybody. And as I've mentioned before, this mental health agenda, this mental health crisis that we are all experiencing is becoming more and more important in all the work that we are seeing, schools, workplaces, right across the board, NHS, staff and patients. And there's a lot of funding out there as well for mental health projects just now, which might act as a match to any of the projects that you're submitting to the council at the moment. And I think the other thing I was just going to add as well is the whole point about the servicing and that mechanics is, I think I said before, think about including that in any pilot projects that you've got, because it just gives that legacy to the projects that you're doing, and make sure that if you're giving bikes to people, that they can continue to cycle that bike after 6 months when the chain's dropped off, or the brake pads have worn thin. And one of the things that we're finding is a lot of bikes that have been given out in past projects are now lying in a shed not being used because nobody is available to service them. So it's given that sort of check-in aftercare as well as part of that wraparound support. I think that's me, Gavin.
Thanks, Shirley. I was going to pull out two things. I realised we're going to be short. Fabulous virtual tour. The 700% increase in cycling at school I thought was amazing. And a lot of the things you were proposing to deliver, such as cycle training, maintenance training, sort of a cycle for health thing, we do deliver here, and hubs could potentially become a focal point for that being delivered, and that wouldn't then be a cost for the hub. It would simply just become another venue where we're able to deliver those things. All right. Thanks, Shirley. On to Andy. Andy, I'm going to stop my screen share, and Andy's going to start screen sharing.
Oh, yeah.
There's a virtual tour, hopefully, of his hub in Stockton.
Let's see how this works. So I don't want to share my screen. I just want to share my webcam, don't I? How do I do that?
So you are doing that, I think. Can people confirm in the chat that they're seeing Andy on screen?
Hopefully when I speak, they see me at least.
Yeah.
I have to keep making noise.
Thanks, Sheena.
Brill. Okie doke. Well, you get my face instead of a presentation. Sorry about that, everyone. I'm Andy. I work for Sustrans, and I manage the Stockton-on-Tees Active Travel Hub. So we're based in North East England, just on the River Tees, and I'm in the hub today. And I thought a useful thing for you all might be to just see the day-to-day running of a hub that's been up and running and funded for a long time. So the project started in 2009 and really got going in sort of 2011. So for over 10 years, we've been delivering active travel things within Stockton-on-Tees. It's grown, it's progressed. So this isn't what you'd probably aim for in the first year, but hopefully you can see the hub and think, oh, in 10 years time, I'd love it. Or maybe in 5 years time, I'd love it if what I was running became something like this. So I'll start outside. Hopefully I'm not going to run out of internet connection while I do this. But the building is deliberately right on the high street in Stockton. We're in a really good location, and we have this lovely premises that people can see. We're deliberately very visible, very easy to find. We want people to walk past and go, oh, wow, look at that place. That looks really welcoming and open. I'll go and chat to them. Here we've got a map of the local area with all of the cycle routes on. So one of the things we do a lot of is just travel planning, face-to-face travel planning or online that I'll talk about a bit later. We have active travel maps that we hand out. These cost about £1 each, but they're really worthwhile. People keep these for a long time and are able to themselves look up where to go walking and cycling for everyday journeys and for just leisure as well. We have a bit of a meeting space here. It's the start of guided walks and guided rides, but it's also just a chill out area that makes the place feel quite, so just more sociable, more comfortable, less like an office because it can have a bit of an officey feel. We also on the ground have a bike parking, 5:30 p.m. Monday to Friday, and people can come in and leave bikes here to their leisure. So far, we've parked 39,000 bikes and we've never lost one. We have tools and pumps, lockers, changing rooms, shower and toilet as well for people to use. We sell a few bikes that we refurbish at really low prices. So this one is for £45. We have bikes that go down to £25 adult bikes and £5 children bikes. The walls are thick in here, so the Wi-Fi might be a bit terrible, but upstairs is a maintenance workshop. So we have bikes that have been checked over and are ready to go out, and bikes that have come in. I believe there's a maintenance course on at the moment. Guys, this is our workshop. This is a lovely volunteer, John, who helps out teaching people how to fix bikes. In here, we also run Dr. Bike sessions, and we refurbish bikes that have been donated to us. I'll let him get back to it and I'll jump in and off this. Oh. The bikes that we refurbish, we hand out to schools, a bit like Shirley was mentioning, schools that have lots of low-income family children. We get bikes to them for free before they do bike ability training. We have given almost 400 bikes to asylum seekers in Stockton over the past 6 years. We also give bikes out through anywhere where somebody's really in need of that kind of transport poverty issue solutions. We can get bikes to them. Things that you can't see in the building so much. We also run a website that's really quite useful. It's something we put a lot more effort into during COVID, and we have, say, just walking routes sat on our website. They're quite visual, quite easy to find. And last month, just over 800 people Googled walking routes and found our website and found a solution to them that isn't, Komoot or All Trails or an app that's trying to get you to log into something or pay or make an account. It's just free, easy solutions. It costs us about 20 quid a month to run our website, but we have thousands and thousands of hits. It's really easy, scalable solution that you could start from the get-go in a project. We also use volunteers quite a lot. So a lot of our delivery, like John, you saw there in the workshop, is volunteer delivered. It makes the project much more sustainable. It gives a really good value for money, but also it has that kind of passion and that community feel as well, because you're working with people and it's being delivered by people from that community. The staff here, I'm the only full-time staff, but we have 2 other part-time staff that work sort of 0.6 contracted hours as well. Partnerships, much like Shirley was saying, seems really key here. So we've worked very closely with Stockton Borough Council. They, about 4 years ago, bought this building that I'm in now and leases it for free. So they have, over the past sort of 10 years, understood the benefit that this kind of project has, both for transport and for public health. So I work closely with the transport department and the public health department. And I was surprised when I was first in this job that I sat down with both of them and they introduced themselves to each other. I didn't realize that transport and public health didn't talk that much, even though it's really, really key that what they do links together. And in a way, with active travel, you can't have one without the other. So we work closely with both, and with the Rights of Way team, Parks and Green Spaces, Environment, Events, Sports and Leisure. We've sort of infiltrated our way into the local authority here, because they have the ability to make this project much more effective. You can deliver whatever you like, but if that word doesn't get out to people, then it's very difficult to make something that's extremely good actually spread around, unless you have a big marketing budget, which we don't. So we can jump on the back of the local authorities' social media posts, their print media that's sent around, and it means that the message that we're trying to send spreads out and reaches far, far more people than we could on our own. So we're much, much stronger together working with the local authority. I know that we're running out of time, so I'll keep it short there. That's all from me, Gavin, and I'll let people fire away with questions.
Thanks, Andy. I'll just reiterate there as well about the promotion and the cross kind of pollination of promotion with the combined authority and the local authority. That is absolutely what we would offer as well down here in West Yorkshire. So I'm just going to reshare my screen and just do a bit of a whistle through 2 slides. I just wanted to cover a bit of process stuff. And then if people have got questions, then maybe we can have 5 minutes of open Q&A. So the application window is open. It's going to run for a period of a couple of months. July 15 is the official close. Funding is open to all comers. So I suspect it's going to appeal to third sector, social enterprises, community interest companies, people of that nature. But given what's been said about consortium and partnership working, I think and I note Richard's comments as well in the chat about how are we going to facilitate that, which is a good question, to which I don't really have a great answer. But I think we will end up with a lot of consortium bids with partnering with local authorities, and I would encourage potential applicants to speak to their local authority. And this might be perhaps bringing back into useful use a redundant or defunct building, of which there are quite a lot, and bringing that back into useful life as well. There's no requirement to have a track record of delivering active travel work, but clearly an ambition or a commitment to developing one is going to be necessary. It's a 10-page application form plus guidance notes, which is hopefully not as onerous as it sounds. Questions cover organisation context, relevant assets, a supporting statement, question around equality, diversity and inclusion, which is a non-negotiable for us now, is a key mayoral objective. Then a tricky question, given what's been said, about financial sustainability. So really thinking about potential revenue streams, as small as they might be, and potential other grants that are going to come in. So really getting you to think about financial sustainability, which I do think will be a tricky question to answer, but the weighting in terms of scoring is not that high, but it does make you think about it. It's seed funding, and in order for hubs to still to be in existence beyond that first year, you're going to have thought about revenue streams and things like that. There's what I consider to be a crux question, and that's your proposal's ability to meet some essential and desirable criteria. And the score weighting reflects the importance of that question, I think. I'm not going to list them all, because that'd be pointless, and they are in the guidance notes if you want to see them. But those criteria are the product, part of the product of our experience and our research. But also we ran a couple of years ago, we commissioned some focus groups in which we spoke to potential participants about things they would expect to see offered by a hub. We're going to hopefully have the funding distributed by late August. We would expect some delivery of activity within a few months of funding being received. And if you've seen my response to Ian's question in the chat, that might simply be becoming a host, a venue for delivery of stuff that's already being delivered. I'm not going to read all those out, and I will share the slides, but those are some of the expected outcomes, kind of mirror what Shirley was saying. And lastly from me, next week I'm hosting a bunch of face-to-face Meet the Funder events. Now this has more been about me giving a bit of an overview and then inviting Shirley, Graham and Andy along to hopefully inspire you. But these are an opportunity to come along and speak to me, possibly speak to a colleague or the local authority with your ideas, with your comments, with your questions, where hopefully we can sit down and I can possibly steer you in the right direction. And I will share these as well. So if people are happy to stick around, Shirley and Andy, I'm looking at you for, shall we do 5 minutes of questions if people have got any?
Sure, yeah, I'm happy for that.
Okay. So if people want to, is there a hands up function? I can't remember.
Yeah, there's a raise hand.
Is there? So if people want to ask a question, they can raise a hand and I will unmute you, I think. Deafening silence. So Emma, did we field all, oh, Mick, right. You're on, Mick, I think.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Just a question, really. I mean, I'm a town councillor in Otley, which is part of Leeds Authority, although we're kind of geographically very separate from the rest of Leeds. So I'm kind of thinking about scale, and I mean, we could put together, I think, possibly with the town council leading with community organisations and involving local health services, a bid. Is that on a sufficient scale that we would be covering a settlement which is about 15,000 plus? I guess it can extend because we've got other areas, other settlements close by, so it could broaden out and would in some areas, like if we involve the schools, the family of schools is wider than Otley. Is that a sufficient scale? I just really be useful to know.
That would, yeah, that would absolutely be sufficient scale, Mick. So
Right.
as long as there's some element of it being publicly accessible. So we did think they wouldn't, you know, these hubs wouldn't necessarily all be focused on the big main urban centres such as Leeds, Bradford, Huddersfield, etc. And we did think some of them, you know, would be located on the fringe of those bigger settlements. So yeah, it would absolutely be on the money. And I'm happy to have a second.
Great, thanks.
Thanks. Any more hands? Emma, did all the questions in the chat get fielded, or that we were able to field?
Pretty much, yeah. I think that there's a couple where Graham, if we can get in touch with Graham afterwards and he can provide a response in terms of the hub that he works at, where Shirley and Andy have responded, so, but we can deal with that afterwards and circulate.
Yeah, there is a question from Naomi. Yes is the answer to that. So can professional training cost be included in the bid? So yeah, upskilling of volunteers or staff to manage sessions within a hub would absolutely be covered. Oh, Emma's already responded to that. Sorry. Sorry, Emma. I should have trusted you were going to do your job perfectly capably.
Naz, I'll send you a link.
There's a hand up from Naomi. Right, you should be able to unmute.
Hello.
Hi Naomi, you all right?
Hi, yeah, good, thanks. Yeah, thanks for this. It's been super inspiring. I was just interested in the embedded active travel hubs in schools, and how that worked, like across the different schools. I think that was in 4th. I don't know if Shirley would be able to say a little bit more about, were they just kind of working holistically and doing a range of different things like infrastructure and training and also?
Yeah, so we were actually approached by the school, and again it comes down to having that enthusiastic person in somewhere that wants to drive something forward. So they approached us to put a Smarter Places application in. Again, I think it's worked because it's getting the right person. The person that leads that is very young. She's approachable as far as the pupils are concerned. So getting the right person for the job is really important. But yeah, she started off by just trying to work out why people don't walk and cycle. And one of the big things was it's not cool. So she just decided the first year was, well, let's make it cool. So they did some mountain biking, they had smoothie bikes, she brought pump tracks, like mobile pump tracks in, and just had fun with them. And that just kind of set that seed. And then just gradually, because the school are so bought into it, a lot of the things have been quite easy to put in place. So the SVQ maintenance within the first year was embedded within the curriculum. She usually works with groups that are not academically minded, perhaps slightly more challenging. So it's small group, bespoke groups, and that she then does the bike maintenance classes with, or led rides. We also do bike buses. So from outlying villages, they will take a group of kids and do a led ride in the morning, sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, from the village to the secondary to the school. So it's a safe, guided ride, and they'll do that maybe repeatedly over a series of times until the pupils are confident with road crossings and the route. And again, that is to allow them that opportunity to cycle to school rather than being bused or taken by car. So she does step count challenges once, if not twice a year. And during lockdown, she opened that out to parents as well. So it became a family step count challenge within the school. So it's just constantly rethinking, retweaking the same themes. Does that answer your question, Naomi?
Still there, Naomi? Oh yeah, thanks. Right, I'm mindful we might get unceremoniously booted out at 11:45 knowing Zoom. So I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to say a big thanks to Shirley, to Andy, and to Graham, who I know has already disappeared for another meeting, such is life. So, and thanks to everyone for attending as well. I will post the video, the recording on our website, and I will also do a summary of the questions that were asked and some of the contacts that came out of it as well. So thank you all, and yeah, thanks particularly to Shirley, Andy, and to Graham, because they put up with me haranguing them for the last 2 weeks about getting slides over and stuff like that. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Thanks,
and hopefully
I'll
see some of you next week at the face-to-face events where we can have a bit of a conversation. So, thank you all.
Brilliant. See you guys.
Cheers, Andy. Thank you, mate.